Hello, welcome to my channel, World War II Books, Where to Start. I'm your host, Captain Payne Best, reporting live from somewhere in a small Dutch town along the German border. Come on in, grab a seat, make yourself comfortable. We're going to talk about stuff and things. We like stuff and things. We're going to do some more memoirs today, and as I said in one of my earliest videos, I think memoirs are probably the easiest entry point for anyone interested in the war, but don't know where to start because it can be a very daunting topic with a lot of names, a lot of places, a lot of events. But memoirs kind of break it down to the simplest aspect, one guy's viewpoint of what he did in the war. And this is my third or fourth video on this kind of topic. So today we're going to cover 3 or 4 memoirs, and I hope you find something interesting that will get you into the conflict. So we're going to start off with To War in a Stringbag by Commander Charles Lamb, originally published in '77, and it is out of print. It was originally a Band of War book. And as I've said in the past, also Band of War books are just kind of my favorite iteration of the kind of the memoir and gritty conflict stuff because they had the best cover art and just had the right feel for the right time. It's out of print, but it's still readily available. And this is one I had to get out of print recently because I passed it up as a kid. This book was everywhere in used bookstores when I was a kid, and the cover just did not appeal to me. It's a biplane lugging a torpedo over some choppy water. And as a kid, I'm thinking, well, we're supposed to be talking about Spitfires and Hellcats and Mustangs and Thunderbolts and Lightning single-wing monoplanes going 400 miles an hour, right? We're not supposed to be talking about biplanes. What is this? This is stuff from the Great War. So I never did get it. But recently I thought, man, that's one I passed up. Maybe I should check it out. And I'm glad I did. It's really cool. He was flying Swordfish torpedo planes off of carriers and also in the Mediterranean, posted to the mountains of Greece, I think it was, when the Brits were trying to keep themselves from getting kicked out of Greece, and then ends up based out of Malta for a while, and does some clandestine agent drops in North Africa, where eventually he pranks his aircraft into a mud flat, ends up as a POW of the Vichy French, of all people, in a really bad prison, as you would totally expect in North Africa, just a dump, unsanitary, nasty, dirty, nasty food, just sickness everywhere, the whole 9 yards. And it's not like you're stuck in mainland Europe, like where you have a hope of you're in civilization and you're like, I could get released one day. It's North Africa. You could just disappear in history and no one will ever know, right? But he does eventually get, I think it was a prisoner exchange or something. Maybe when the French got out of the colonies in North Africa. I can't quite remember that part of it. But he went through a lot in a fairly short space of time, and he should have been dead right off the bat. This should have never been written. He was on an aircraft carrier at the beginning of the war. I think it was Victorious, which was sunk pretty quickly in the North Sea by a German torpedo from a U-boat. And he foolishly went below decks to his cabin to get some personal effects in his paybook while the ship is busy sinking. No power in the below spaces, so he's just fumbling around in the dark. A completely foolish thing to do. When you're struck by a torpedo and that ship starts listing, you need to get off the boat. But he was silly enough to worry about I think it was a wristwatch and his paybook. And he got lucky and getting into the ocean and getting picked up before he froze to death. So right there, he's expended probably 6 of his 9 lives, right? But combat pilot, RAF did not let people go, or RN either, until the war was done. They didn't believe in combat exhaustion. If you could fly, you did. And so he gets posted to another carrier and into the Med, and when that ship is put out of action, he goes into the Grecian campaign, as I said. So he went through a lot, and a lot of injuries and some malnutrition, as you would expect in the prison camp. After some rehab, he eventually ends up back in combat again in '45 in the Pacific, where he is wounded again in what sounds like a horrific catapult accident. He was a launch officer for a strike one day, and he doesn't really express exactly what happened, but it sounds like a wire snapped somewhere on deck and chopped through his leg, almost severing it. And he should have died there again. He should have bled out right on the deck. But somehow they got him to the sick bay just in time to staunch the flow of blood, and they didn't even amputate. But this guy went through 8 or 10 operations post-war to put himself back together. Walked with a limp forever after. But he was one of those plucky British guys. I'm happy to be alive. I did my part, and I got through. A very good memoir, humbly written. The Brits are never rah rah rah, sis and bob about how great they are unless your name is Bernard Law Montgomery. So I found that pretty valuable for something I had skipped over as a kid and come back to 3 or 4 decades later. To War in a Stringbag by Charles Lamb. And then next up we have I Flew for the Fuhrer by Heinz, Knoke. Originally published in 51. Now it clocks in 190 pages. This is a really brief one. This one is in print, sort of, kind of. You can get it in Audible and you can get it in Kindle. But if you want the print edition, you're going to have to go to secondary sources. Now, this is obviously a German fighter pilot who survived and wants to tell you all about it. And like another memoir I covered, The Big Show by Pierre Klosterman, this is done in diary format throughout the book. So it's diary entries, and I got to presume they're recapitulated exactly, maybe embellished a little bit here and there, with some introductory material about his pre-war life. And there's a new afterword because this was a later edition, later iteration I have. So there's some post script comments by the author too. It's very brief. It reads pretty quick and breezy. You have your standard high idealism, beginning of the war, and then oh shit, we're in Russia, this is getting serious, and then the Americans come in, and man, there's just no end in sight, and we're doomed. So you have your typical progression of a German soldier, combat pilot, U-boat guy, whatever, as the series of disillusionments continues to pound him. But he got out alive, and not taken prisoner by the Russians either, which was a bonus. Always a bonus not to be a Russian prisoner. So he had about 52 aerial kills, I believe. Some on the Russian front, some in the Western front against the 4-engine bombers. And you had to be kind of an expert to survive this, this attacking American bomber streams. You had to get lucky and be good to get through so many combats alive like that. And he and a buddy came up with a really bizarre idea one night in barracks, as they're desperate to stop these American bomber streams. We just don't have enough pilots. We don't have enough aircraft. And this is even before they have long-range escorts. We're just not knocking down enough of them. What can we do? And they came up with this crazy, bizarre idea to lug a 500-pound bomb underneath their Me109s and get a few thousand feet above a 4-engine bomber stream and drop their bomb with a timer or fuse on it to explode right in the midst of the bombers and try to cause a chain reaction. So you knock down 12, 15, 20 at once. Cheaper by the dozen kind of routine. He immediately sells this to his superior, and that superior, and that superior. And within 2 weeks of practicing this thing, they actually try it a few times in combat with what you might expect, little to no result. Concept, pretty wild. Execution, extremely difficult. It's one of the more bizarre things they tried during the war, the Germans did, to stop the American bombers. And it kind of shows you the level of desperation that they would go to. And this was in 43. This wasn't in 45. This was in 43. So the level of desperation they already had, realizing they just couldn't stop the onslaught. What do? We'll try anything. So that's I Flew for the Fuhrer by Heinz Knoke. And I must add, he has a standard disclaimer in there that most German memoirs do. I wasn't a Nazi. I was just happy for the German people to come back from World War I and throw off the shackles of Versailles. But I don't agree with the Hitler regime. Yada, yada, yada. So take that as a grain of salt. Kind of necessary to get published in the 50s. Just kind of expected. Distancing yourself from the regime. I was just a humble guy doing my job. So take that for what it's worth. It's not as bad as the SS guys doing their disclaimers, because that gets really outlandish. You can almost kind of sort of believe Heinz Knoke. Maybe. Alright, so that's 2 down. And then we come to the one I dislike intensely, Stuka Pilot by Ulrich Rudel. Published in 59 originally. And this is another short one, 239 pages. It's gone through countless iterations. You'll see a lot of different cover art for it. Still in print, still going strong. And this guy was an unapologetic, unreconstructed Nazi. He was one of the guys that got out at the end of the war and went to South America to sell his skills to Argentinian Air Force, to build them up from scratch and bring them into the jet age and all that nonsense. And he was pretty ardent fascist through the rest of his life. So he never distanced himself from Hitler, never disavowed anything he did during the war. He was proud of it, happy to be part of it. Too bad it didn't work out. And if you don't like my views, who cares? I'm Ulrich Rudel, and you're not. So this guy is famous for doing like 2,600 plus combat missions from 39 to 45. all in a Stuka. He did a little bit of fighter pilot action here and there. He was pretty flexible. He might even had a couple kills. I can't remember. The problem is, I went here and did this, and I went there and did that memoir with exactly zero emotion, zero reflection, zero introspection, zero contemplation. It's just me, I did this, I did that, I did this, I did that. A whole lot of statistics and pounds of bombs dropped, hits obtained, tanks knocked out, the weather, so-and-so got killed. But there's just no wider viewpoint, no human aspect, I should say. There's very little bit that comes through to tell you Rudel was human at all. He was awarded every highest high-level award you could get in the Nazi regime, the Knight's Cross, Oak Leaf Swords, and Diamonds. And he did so much and flew so long, they had to invent a special award to top him up above everybody else. He had the, I think it was Swords of Diamonds. He had like the Golden Knight's Cross or something like that to add to the luster. And he eventually gets his leg chopped off. I think it was by ground flak. He gets beat up in a Stuka so bad he has to have one of his legs amputated a little bit above the knee. Now that would knock most of us out of the award. Like, hey, I'm done. I've had enough. It's 44. We're losing. We ain't gonna win. It can only get worse. Not Rudel. He comes back and wants himself posted to combat again. He can't get enough. He does everything for the Fuhrer. Morning, noon, night, afternoon, Wednesday at midnight, non-stop. That's incredible endurance. No such thing as combat fatigue for this guy. Again, zero emotion. He's like a robot. He's just like a robot. So what you can get out of it, I'm not too sure. Is it a valuable read? Maybe, kind of, sort of. Maybe. I read it twice and didn't get anything better out of it the second time than the first. But you be the judge. So that's Stuka Pilot by Heinz Ulrich Rudel. And then we're on to a really cool one that is kind of cheating a little bit because it's not actually a memoir. It's written by a guy named Larry Fuhrer, and the book is called Fly for Your Life. Published in 368 pages, and it is out of print. Secondary sources only to find this one, but I highly encourage you to do so. I'm cheating on this one because it kind of reads like a memoir. Yeah, Larry Forrester is writing it about Bob Tuck, a British fighter pilot. But it has the style and feeling of a memoir. You can pretty much substitute the pronoun I for he. And you can see Bob Tuck actually writing this. It's very, very good and underrated, and I'm kind of pretty disappointed this one has gone out of print over time. Bob Tuck was a Spitfire pilot who didn't have any business being there. He almost failed out of primary flight school. A great story Larry Forrester tells in there about going through cadet training and being miserably bad at what he's trying to do. Basic flight controls, landing, takeoff, spin, you name it. Hardly start the engine. Right? He's so nervous and so high strung. He's a young kid. He's 19, 20, whatever, and just struggling to get the basic. But he wants to fly so bad, but he's just really bad at it. So his final checkout, his fail-out exam, if you will, they take you up and try to make you solo, and if you can do it, great, you pass on to the next stage. If you can't, boom, you're out. And he just kind of gave up. Said, I'm done. I haven't done anything right. I'm a complete screw-up. What's it matter? And he finds that once he relaxes, he can actually fly. And he does great. And the instructor kind of, and once he's on the ground, the instructor says, well, what was the problem all along? You always could do it. It's just one of those hinges of history, for a man. It's kind of crazy. You give up and relax, and suddenly it all comes to you naturally. So he goes on to become a squadron commander early in the war, and to his disappointment, he gets stuck with Hurricanes instead of Spits. But he details all the flying through the nasty weather and the difficulties of adjusting to being a squadron commander and letting these young kids do their thing on nice weekends, being home with the family or their girlfriends or the wives. But then the next morning you're back in your suit, your uniform and tie, because they always had to wear ties, and you're up in the sky fighting for life every day, non-stop. And it's a really good viewpoint for that. Of course, he gets shot down over France and ends up as a POW behind the wire for a long time, 2-3 years. And the prison life stuff is just as good as the pilot stuff. Excuse me. He tells you what it's like to be malnourished and having nothing to do, and withering away, hoping that you get liberated, hoping that you don't die of starvation in a POW camp, and the futility of trying to escape, and not having the courage to try or the opportunity to try, even though you're like, man, it couldn't be any worse than being here, but you just don't have the ability or you know, the wherewithal to trigger the escape. He eventually does escape with a buddy when the POW camp is evacuated as the Russians are coming to invade Poland and Germany late 44, early 45, and they slip away from the train they're on. And there's a really poignant scene where they run across a Russian soldier and they make a meal together. He's got enough twigs to start a fire, and he's got an onion in his bag. And they peel this onion and stick it in the water to boil, and it's the best smell they've ever. Their mouths are watering. They're just dreaming. They're crying. They're watery-eyed. They're just so grateful. This is the best meal they've ever had. They got a single little onion boiling in a pot, and they're happy as clams. It's a really, really poignant scene. After another, harrowing escape, they were stuck in a farmhouse or a barn or something with a German platoon or whatever that was bunking there for the night. And Bob Tuck's buddy has dysentery and can't control himself, and they're like, hoping that they don't discover just by the smell. And this German platoon's got a couple, is it Russians? Actually, it was Russians, but they didn't want to give themselves away. They got a German prisoner there who could play piano. There's a piano in this barn for a reason. They make this kid play at gunpoint for a few hours. Everything he knows is his repertoire, right? And when he's done playing, his fingers are cramped up, he can't do any more. They take him out and shoot him. That's nitty-gritty war stuff right there. So I really think Fly for Your Life is a fantastic 5-star material, and I highly recommend chasing it down. It's not that hard to find, but it's good stuff. So that'll wrap up my memoirs for today. Hope you found something interesting in here. We had To Warn a Stringbag by Charles Lamb, and I Flew for the Fuhrer by Heinz, Knoke, and Stuka Pilot by Ulrich Rudel, and that's kind of the stinker in the bunch there, and Fly for Your Life by Larry Forrester. Drop some comments, think about subscribing, give me a like or something, man, and we'll come back at you another time with another hot video. Thanks for watching. See you later.